A setting or place without people is like a barren wasteland filled with nothing but an empty space that might look cool but doesn't have any soul. Let's take any great setting and world, remove its characters, and suddenly the setting lost almost all of its charm. On the other hand, give me a mediocre setting or story, but a great set of characters as protagonists or side characters, and I might like your story, plot and setting a lot more. This video isn't necessarily about the main protagonist of your story. This video is about everyone. The people that bring your setting to life. The people that keep your world running, even if your protagonists wouldn't exist. Without them, your world just feels like a theater set piece. Like a set of video game levels that are only active whenever the player character is attempting said level. Which means creating characters in your world and people that live in your world is just as important as creating the world itself. Especially when creating places, organizations, the history and other parts of your setting. It's important to give these parts within your setting a personality by adding characters. There's of course no reason to go all out and give everyone the deepest and most tragic backstory that has more detail than the part of your setting itself. Let's take a knightly order for example. Its lore might be complicated and convoluted. 10 different rights of entry, 20 different ranks, a codex every knight has to honor, or they'll risk to be ousted, banished or even killed. This knightly order might be interesting on its own, but without a character that is associated with the order, nobody really cares. In the end, people like parts of your setting because of the people representing them, and less because of the information that is presented to them. I think one of the most popular examples of characters that made certain faction or places into what they are and gave them an identity that went beyond what the character has been originally portrayed as was Boba Fett. Taking Star Wars as an example is almost cheating, because the fans pulled every random character out of the originals and made tons of extended universe lore and additions to them over the years. But Boba Fett and the Mandalorians are a class on their own, I think. Counting all of his voice lines together in the 2 original movies he appeared in brings me to 4. But despite his lack of words, people liked him. They thought he was the shit. The cool, mysterious bounty hunter who is the best of the best. Why? Doubt there existed much lore about the Mandalorians back then, but today they are an integral part of the entire Star Wars setting. And well, the first 2 seasons of the Mandalorian series were good. But the important bit about this is that they exist at all, including the rather bad Boba Fett standalone series. No matter the quality, nobody would have cared if not for the OG and the originals. Before we continue, consider what characters are the figureheads of factions and places in your setting. Tell me about them in the comments, and if you are already at it, consider leaving a like and subscribing. I'd really appreciate it. If you want to create characters that fit your setting and the parts of your setting they represent, there are 3 ways to deliver those characters. First of all, there's a character I'd call the Paragon, the prime example of what this part of your setting represents. This can be a lot of things. From the quintessential hard-working peasant living within the county to the knight in shining armor from the Order of Shining Armor Knights. Second, it can be the factions or places outlier, the black sheep, I'd like to call it. These characters contrast most or all of what the faction stands for. They are in rebellion to the faction or place's ideals, or just go against the grain of the town society and will. Lastly, just any person. Normally, people are within a spectrum of something. Nobody's either the perfect ideal of a faction or place, nor an absolute rebel, going against everything it stands for, even if they might be closer to one or the other. So how do you create a character that could chill this cool thing that's part of your setting? I mean, like I said, you first need a character. The important bit is interweaving them with your faction. Your character's background should be heavily tied into the place or faction they are representing. Take for example Kahir Mavre Dyfrin Eb Kellach, the Nilfgaardian, who isn't a Nilfgaardian. Kahir first followed and later traveled with Geralt in the Witcher book series. Kahir was first and foremost an interesting character, but he also delivered interesting bits of world building, explaining the structures and the cultural understanding of the inner workings of the Nilfgaardian Empire. Geralt and many others saw him as a Nilfgaardian, as he was part of the Nilfgaardian army and secret service, and a noble from the lands Nilfgaard conquered. However, only people from the city and region proper are true Nilfgaardians. Everyone else just hails from the respective province. So does Kahir, who has the habit to correct everyone that he's actually from Vicovaro and not from Nilfgaard. Another important factor is their personality, as the characters should have their personalities heavily influenced by the part of the setting they are representing, for the better or the worse. Take for example Inquisitor Eisenhorn from Warhammer 40k. He's probably one of the most recognizable characters of the franchise. Eisenhorn is known for his unwavering dedication to protecting humanity from the threats that exist within the 40k universe. He's a determined and resourceful individual who operates on the fringes of imperial society. Eisenhorn uses a combination of cunning, investigative skills, and combat prowess to combat heresy, corruption, and chaos. His personality is probably the ideal of what any Inquisitor should be. But like any Inquisitor, he struggles with the corruption of chaos himself, meaning he pretty much represents what the entire faction is about. But don't think you need big characters to represent certain factions, organizations, or places. Smaller people are good enough, or people who are otherwise more in the background is good enough too. The earlier example of Boba Fett proves my claim after all. It's important that people get interested in the character and that they want to learn more about the faction or place through them. And for that, they obviously don't even have to talk more than 4 lines. A Worldbuilding Sage video wouldn't be a Worldbuilding Sage video without a world-building example of the Worldbuilding Sage. So let's talk about Cecilia Bouthillier. Cecilia was born during the turmoil of the Second War of the Golden Coalition, where the United Kingdom of Nurigma-Slosnik, the most serene Republic of Talmar, the Kingdom of Bourbon, and the Kingdom of Saragossa, and other polities of the continent formed a coalition to wage war against the Othenian magocracy of the Basilean dynasty. Cecilia not only witnessed the turmoil of the war, but lived through it. Cecilia grew up at the front lines, as her father was an important mercenary leader. She studied the arts of wizardry and war at the Rose Tower, one of the 13 Archwizards towers spread throughout the continent. Cecilia's participation in the war led to major victories for the Golden Coalition, which meant they could end the 4-decade-lasting war on much more favorable terms. For her efforts, Cecilia was later granted the Archwizardry of the Rose, a post she keeps to this day. Shortly after the war, she recognized the trend away from mercenary armies and towards standing, more disciplined armies. She founded the Order of the Rose, with the blessing of the King of Bourbon and later the remaining lords of the continent, despite its focus on war, strategy, and war wizardry. Despite her political successes, Cecilia isn't a woman of many words, and she doesn't boast huge swaths of charisma either. Cecilia is regularly described as a cold, distanced person, analytical to the core, ever focused with a clear goal in mind. Shows of emotions are sparse for Cecilia, and more inclined to be negative than positive. Gaining her approval is a hardship many of her students failed to gain over the years. The Order of the Roses grew the most once she stopped watching over recruitment and apprenticeship processes herself. And because of her, the whole order gained a reputation of being a bunch of cold and distanced wizards who dress themselves in outdated frilly clothing of past noble courts. And that's it for today's video, world builders. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, leave a like and maybe subscribe. See ya!